Ladies and gentlemen, a great pleasure to be here this morning. I was very pleased to receive an email from my old friend Bharat Patel inviting me to this function some time ago, and I very readily agreed. My knowledge about the University of Michigan, and especially the Ross School, is mainly through Professor Prahlad. I've known him for many, many years. I used to attend CK's CEO forum, which he held every year in India very regularly. And we had very close association in our group with the Ross School. Our people attended several of the programs. Professor Wayne Brockbank, who's here, conducted sessions in our campus at Vikhroli, and my memory of CK has been tremendous. I think his contribution to management thinking, of course, globally, but especially in India, has been very inspiring for India, many Indian CEOs, and of course the Confederation of Indian Industry, where he has conducted several seminars. I don't know if many of you know about it, but the CII has started a program called India at 75, which was first inspired by Professor Prahlad as to what India should be in its 75th year. And there's a major program at the CII, and I have the pleasure of chairing the council of CII at 75. I thought I'd divide my comments into two parts. One is something related to your topic, especially the limitless opportunities part. And secondly, as suggested by the chairman of the conference, I thought I'd speak a little bit of what we have done at the Godrej Group over the last 10 to 15 years in terms of business processes, to further our progress. Well, as all of us know, we are meeting at a time where the global economy is again facing headwinds. This is after about 3 years. Last time, the headwinds started around the last quarter of 2008, and then the global economy recovered from it, but again we seem to be facing them, both in the United States and Europe, and of course Japan too, post the earthquake. So there are many question marks as to how the global economy will fare over the next few quarters. I am, however, very optimistic that India should continue to do very well despite the global problems. And I feel we are even better placed to absorb the global headwinds than we were in 2008. I, of course, feel that the RBI, the Reserve Bank of India, has overdone the rate increases. It has not helped inflation very much, and we are paying a price in terms of slowdown in the growth rate as a result. I also feel that the RBI, in allowing the rupee to depreciate in the last few weeks, is further adding to the problems, especially the inflationary pressures. They had a stated policy to intervene only when the fluctuations in the forex rates were very high, which they have been over the last couple of weeks, but they haven't intervened very much. Nevertheless, as I said, I'm very optimistic, and I'd like to give a few reasons why I'm very optimistic. The goods and services tax legislation, to my mind, will be the biggest reform in India after the major reforms of 1991. It will help resolve many of India's macroeconomic problems. Once it comes into force, it is expected to add 1.5 to 2 percentage points to India's GDP growth, other things being equal. Of course, sometimes it's difficult for people to understand why that should happen. Clearly, because indirect taxes will be rationalized from the present system where you pay central taxes, state taxes, city taxes, transfer taxes, etc. It will be one goods and services tax. There won't be tax on tax. It is likely to bring down prices of many consumer products by approximately 5 percentage points. That should lead to higher consumption, higher production, thus strong GDP growth. Yet, government revenues are likely to increase very considerably because the evasion of indirect taxes, which is quite prevalent in our country, will be very difficult once the GST comes about. Because if you don't pay tax at one state, you would get caught at the next, etc. So, fiscal deficit is likely to come down, inflation is likely to come down, and GDP growth is likely to increase very considerably. So, as you can see, it is likely to address a lot of our current macroeconomic problems. The other thing I'm very optimistic about is the new manufacturing policy. It has already been drafted. It is likely to be announced in the next couple of months. And the aim of the manufacturing policy is to increase the salience of manufacturing in Indian GDP from the current 16% to about 25% in 10 years. And there are many facilitation clauses in that, whether it is labor legislation, encouragement to, fiscal encouragement to training and development within companies, and various other factors. If it is successful, even if we don't reach the 25% salience mark, it is likely to add tremendously to boost GDP growth. There is a little known new policy called the competition policy. I don't mean the Competition Act, which is already legislation, but there's a new policy called the competition policy, which, when finalized, and again I expect it will be announced in 2 to 3 months, is likely to ensure that all government ministries, departments, ensure that their legislations, their policies, their rules and regulations encourage competition. Very often we see how government policies tend to be actually anti-competition. They tend to be restrictive. And as we all know, competition is a major, strong competition is a major pillar of free economies in terms of encouraging GDP growth. I think we've all seen what we've gone through over the last few months in terms of protests against lack of transparency and probity and against corruption in the country. Hopefully, lessons will be learned from that. Clearly, there's likely to be legislation to try and control corruption, and I expect government will also move, and a lot of business associations are suggesting to the government that they move to increase the transparency in government, reduce the case-by-case regulations, reduce the number of issues on which one has to go to the government for permissions, allow most citizens to interact with the government through the internet. Some states have already started that very successfully. Some states like Madhya Pradesh and Bihar have brought in legislation where if when citizens make applications for their regular needs, If it is not cleared by a certain period of time, which is generally quite short, I think it's a couple of weeks or so, the bureaucrat concerned can be fined and no excuses can be made. And that's worked reasonably well. So if the government moves in some of these directions, it could lead to better transparency, better probity, and reduce corruption, which again can help GDP growth in the country. And lastly, I feel quite confident that India can do very well, because just as I was complaining about the RBI having raised the interest rates over 12 different occasions in the last, I don't know, year or 15 months, it will then have the opportunity, if there are problems in the economy, to reduce rates and provide monetary stimulus. I'll now go to some of the points which I think some of the business processes our group has adopted over the last 10 to 15 years, which have helped us very considerably. And I think that might give you some pointers of my thinking in terms of business and business processes. First of all, we were one of the first groups in India to introduce an ERP system, an enterprise resource planning system, which has helped us tremendously. We introduced ERP around 15 years ago, and it has helped us work on negative working capital in most of our businesses. And we've been helped particularly because most of our businesses are not very capital intensive, and when your working capital becomes negative, it provides a lot of surpluses for your growth resources. The other thing that has helped us tremendously over the years in improving our manufacturing processes is early adoption of Japanese manufacturing systems, TQM, TPM, Kaizens, quality circles, again introduced around 15 years ago, and that has helped us improve our manufacturing efficiencies dramatically over the years. The most, to my mind, the most important decision we took in terms of efficiency improvement was adoption of EVA, economic value added, as the major financial metric in our group. That was done about 10 years ago. I think all of you must be aware that EVA is basically measurement, of course, get into a little bit of detailing, but basically measurement of profits after the cost of capital has been deducted. And we introduced EVA as a major financial metric. Obviously, we measure other metrics, we report other metrics, but we use this a lot for decision making, whether it is marketing inputs, whether it is acquisitions, or whether it is capital expenditure. We use EVA as a major metric for decision making, and we have a target for EVA improvements in each of the businesses, and a very large part of our workforce, almost all employees, other than unionized labor, are on a very strong variable remuneration, which is based on EVA improvements. And that has helped us tremendously. I think EVA is reasonably well correlated to market caps also of companies. What is quite amazing is when a study has been done, many Indian companies have negative EVA. And this one move, to my mind, has helped us very tremendously over the years. And a couple of other things which we introduced which has helped very considerably. One is, many years ago, we formed a young executive board. We invited very strong young managers in their late 20s or early 30s, promising young managers, to be part of the board. I think each one had a term of about 2 years, and then it changed. They were from across businesses, and they were to study strategy, corporate governance, other issues that affect the company, report to our group management committee, which consists of the CEOs of all the companies on a quarterly basis. And that helped both getting very strong bottom-up feedback and also encouraging these young people at a very early age to get a lot of very important information about their companies in the group and being able to study it. Another thing we did was on the suggestion of Dr. C.K. Prahlad. So for strategic planning, we decided to have two teams, as he had suggested. And using his parlance, we call them the blue team and the red team. These were two teams of young persons from the business, again, late 20s, early 30s. Each one was to make an independent 3-year plan for their business. They could talk to people, senior people within the group, they talked to people outside the group, opinion builders, market research experts, economists, others, except they want to talk to each other. And each of them would come up with a strategic plan for their business. Then the senior team would sit with these two teams. We call that the plum team, and elicit the best out of the plans to finally conclude the 3-year strategic plan for the group. About 10 years ago, we had about the only listed company we had in our group was a company called Godrej Soaps. We decided to de-merge the company and form a very focused, it was a conglomerate, make a focused, fast-moving consumer goods company. We named it Godrej Consumer Products. And because the soap business went to Godrej Consumer Products, the rest of the company was renamed Godrej Industries. That enabled us to have a very focused, fast-moving consumer goods company, which has paid us a lot of dividend. And I think just being able to focus on the businesses concerned has helped us tremendously. And since we did this about 10 years ago, the share price of Godrej Consumer Products has increased by a compounded annual growth rate of about 40% per year, and the rest of the business has had an increase at about 50% per year, CAGR, over the last 10 years. So just clearly taking a decision to focus on the business has helped very considerably. The last thing I'd like to mention is that we have now have a financial strategy for the group, which we call 10 by 10. We want to be 10 times our sales, current sales in 10 years' time, which is a CAGR of about 26-27%. We expect to do this by about a 15 to 20% organic growth rate and 10% inorganic growth rate through acquisitions. We made several acquisitions in the near past. We hope to continue to grow by acquisitions. And why 10% by acquisition? Because that's the kind of acquisitions we think we can do without diluting our equity. So whatever surpluses we have each year, we keep a debt equity ratio about 1:1. That sum of money can be used to acquire businesses, which can add 10 percentage points to our growth, and then get to a stage where we can successfully grow 10 times in 10 years. Thank you very much.